Hello everybody. We've seen what's been going on over the past few days. I've already made a video about this, but I just wanted to kind of add some more, continue with that topic basically, because it is becoming quite concerning what's going on in the UK at the moment, or certainly in England anyway, and in Ireland as well. I think what we're seeing now is what's been there. I think I don't know if I might have said it in a previous video. We've basically seen what's essentially what's kind of been there under the surface for a very, very long time. Excuse me while I have my coffee. I personally think we are heading towards some kind of a territorial warfare now. There have been let's get something out of the way very, very quickly. I do not think that targeting, while there may be serious issues with communities as a whole, and maybe not necessarily as individuals necessarily in and of themselves, but people belonging to certain communities that have got issues, and people who haven't spoken up and haven't really done anything to address the problems of their community, or at least tried to. I don't think look, it's not right to be targeting innocent people on all sides of whatever side people are out there, seemingly supporting or pretending to support whatever the case may be. And like I said before in the previous video, I just think that it's just completely out of order, and it is criminal. There's no need to be damaging public buildings and trashing people's shops and things like that. That's just out of order. And while I do understand, and I do actually completely understand the frustrations, I can understand certain frustrations to some extent from the left, but predominantly I do understand a lot of the frustrations and tend to side more with the more right-leaning aspects of what's going on. I think, look, at the end of the day, there are people who are acting like thugs from all sides of this, and I think what we've been seeing in just pretty much everywhere, really, honestly, over the last few days, but certainly in Plymouth and Birmingham, and there are serious community tensions, I think personally, across pretty much the entirety of the northeast of England, if not most of the country, really, actually. But certainly in the more kind of what you would call sort of relative poverty-stricken areas of the country, where there's a lot of, I just think a lot of pent-up frustration and anger at authorities, especially since COVID, because of the way that people were treated throughout the lockdowns. But I think as well as people have seen their communities change demographically speaking, and also with regards to just austerity that's completely decimated communities and cities and towns in terms of the sort of retail power and the income that used to bring into the city, and how so many cuts and austerity measures that have been placed on authorities to save money, or because they just haven't got enough money to do things that they used to do. So people have watched that. So what we've been seeing playing out, it's for some people it's an excuse to allow all of those sort of frustrations and angers that have been bubbling under the surface for many years, actually, probably since the 90s. The things there have been tensions and sort of flare-ups here and there, I guess, over the years, but nothing dramatic, really. Not really. I mean, look, when I grew up in the 90s and the noughties, let's have this right. Let's get this straight. Let's have some truth. There have been a lot of problems with antisocial behaviour in like my own city in Hull, but probably across a lot of the north and northeast of the country, probably in the Midlands as well. I think pretty much just across the board, there have been a lot of problems with working class communities in and amongst themselves for probably a good 30 years, if not longer than that, for 35, 40 years maybe. Because we've seen the weakening of the family unit. We've seen a complete decline in Christianity and more of a kind of individualist-based society, less community, less people looking out for each other, crime being allowed to flourish because police have been underfunded, they're understaffed, and because of this left push, ideological push to make everyone feel safe and welcome, and for the sake of tolerating people, and not because I think ultimately the government and authorities, they know that they've known for a long time there are serious hostilities, let's say, between certain communities, because I just think it's because people, especially when people are in situations where, like, social deprivation, degradation, I think people become desperate, and people tend to become a little bit kind of, I don't want to use the word, but maybe somewhat feral to some extent, maybe. It's not necessarily all there. It's not necessarily all their own fault. It's. I think a lot of the problems that we've seen in working class communities across the country really are down to just I think ultimately politics. Honestly, I just think that a lot of issues have come about really probably since the 60s, 70s, where there's been less, much less focus on families sticking together and sort of Christian, whatever you want to call them, but let's just call them Christian values, or more Christian way of life. Let's put it. Let's just for argument's sake. It's we've left we've abandoned our what was essentially our roots in many respects in recent history, in the British Isles, England's recent history. Just looking at the dogs. I've got 2 dogs, and I wasn't sure what they were doing. I think a lot of things have gone wrong over the last few decades. It's not. I don't think we can necessarily blame. Like, I don't think it's. I think, well, we could say to blame politicians and governments, but as in, like, you know, people often resort to blaming the boomer generation things for the problems, and yes, people have. I think, but they're just they were a symptom. They were a byproduct of their generation. You know, so you can't blame any one particular thing because these things are highly complicated, but I think that the sort of independent mindset and more atheistic, or whatever you want to call it, you know, agnostic-based sort of society with, I think honestly, I think a lot of the issues over the last few decades stem down to well, there are issues with the working class communities, but there are also a lot of problems, I think, with the middle classes and this overall sense of that we know better, we should have the last say kind of thing. We're smarter, we're more sophisticated than other people, we're the more morally righteous class kind of thing, and you know, everybody else is ignorant and racist and bigots and all this kind of mentality, attitude and rhetoric, which you see in the media all, which is like a cancer and has spread throughout the media for the last few decades, and no more so with regards to the BBC, ITV, Sky News, a lot of the newspapers in Britain. So you've got this very dominant left wing, and you've had it for a long time, this narrative, this ideology that this is the morally righteous, and yes, to some extent it might be the case that you know, I don't think anybody has any problem. Most people don't have problems with a small amount of immigration contributing to our society, and a small number of people coming to live and stay in the UK. I don't think most people have a problem with that. But when you've got, I think personally, I think there was a kind of like a sweet spot from really the sort of 40s until what, the 60s, 70s, and then you started having problems with actual racism. You know, let's call it out for what it was. But to some extent, you know, you can understand to some extent why people were to some extent xenophobic and racist. It's not so much just about racism. It's about tribalism. It's about human nature being territorial and this tribal mentality of people. I think that happens across a lot of parts of the globe. It's just this massive push from, you know, what was essentially kind of a more kind of quiet, insular, more tight-knit sense of a community in England throughout much of the for at least a few decades in England, throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, and then you know the impacts of capitalism and globalism essentially rendered England kind of outdated and not fit for the not fit for the latter part of the 20th century, and certainly as we got into the 21st century, that it was absolutely necessary for the UK to become a part of. Well, that actually started when we joined into the legislation of the EU. But certainly once we got towards Blair's government and Brown's government, that's when I think things really started to ramp up, and I think that's when a lot of serious, very, very serious mistakes were made. You know, again, it's fine to have a certain level of immigration, because the UK is a small. It's a small country. Countries, a series of small countries, and I think that, generally speaking, I think a lot of people in most countries would prefer to be around people that look like them, that sound like them, that have certain things in common with them. You know, I don't think nobody's saying that everybody has to do exactly the same things as you. You know, and that's one of the great things about England. But at the same time, that I think at the end of the day there has to be some kind of common ground with people. Otherwise, if you don't really have a society, you don't really have a culture anymore. And this pluralism, this kind of idea that our culture is a combination of different cultures. I don't think that's. I don't really buy it completely. I understand that kind of that angle, that attitude, that point of view, but I don't think that's necessarily the whole picture. Yes, England's certainly been influenced by a lot of different aspects of the world, and partly through colonialism over the course of history. That's true, but I think to discredit or to try and play down Britain's own unique aspects, perhaps more nuanced culture, you could say. I think that's wrong, and it's deliberate. There are things that do make people there are things that make people more of something than others, let's say. You know, it's not just about just because you're brought up in a country doesn't necessarily mean that you're one of those people necessarily. I think it depends. I think it depends how you evolve as a person in that society. I think if you adopt the language and it's difficult exactly to say what does or doesn't make someone, but I think there are certainly. Because it's not black and white. It's a complex picture of many different things. It's not just the language you speak. It's how you. It's not just having an accent. It's your heritage really. It's like I would say that there are people that've got more of a right to be in a country than others. Like right now, I'm in Thailand. I don't have a right to be here. I'm not Thai. I don't consider myself Thai, obviously, because I don't look Thai. I don't sound Thai. My heritage, my family background has got nothing to do with this part of the world. You know, my family didn't come from here. My family came from Europe. I mean, yes, you could go look throughout the entire of human history and trace everybody's roots back to the plains of Africa or whatever. You know, but that's kind of it's kind of a bit of an irrelevant argument really, because yes, that is true, but over the course of human history, people have developed their own people are different. People are different people. They've developed their own languages, their own forms of communication, really, their own art, their own culture, their own societies. It's not. It doesn't. It's kind of pointless even really bringing it up. Really. Yes, it is valid, but it's not. I wouldn't say it was necessarily particularly a strong point to make, really. So I do think that Britain does have its own culture, certainly. I think it's not as clear cut, say, as other countries, because there's a lot of. It's more of a kind of nuanced, complicated kind of a picture where it's the. I think if you adopt the language and you abide by the law and you share like certain like nuanced areas, like perhaps like things like a common commonalities with sport or religion, even or humour. Certain activities that people do together, attending like festivals together, basically sharing more or less the same kind of values. Of course, everybody's different, and not everyone even of the same actual people of the same culture are going to agree and be exactly the same across the board. Of course not. That would be utterly ridiculous. That isn't the case. But for the most part, most people do, certainly among the same classes anyway, in England, there are a lot of common things that bring people together. And there are things that, while certain people might meet certain criteria that you could say makes them English or Scottish, Irish or Welsh, whatever, there are things that it's kind of, to some extent, they're not quite that, they're just not really, it's kind of the difference between buying kind of a Rolls Royce and a cheap knockoff version of it. It might look similar, but it's not. It might have some degree of things that kind of look the same, sound the same to some extent, maybe. But once you start peeling away and looking under the surface and really getting to know the imitation, as it were, or something that's supposed to represent something, then you find out that it's not quite what you thought. It's not really that at all. It's a kind of more of a hybrid kind of thing. And I think that's important to say. Yes, you can claim to be British because you might have been born in Britain, and if you stand and support the people, the actual real natives of that country, who've been there and their families have been there for centuries, then I have no problem with that at all. I don't take any. But again, you could say you still technically, I think it's about your attitude, it's your mentality, it's the way that you live your life, it's the things that you represent, the things that you support or don't support. It's your alliances. I think that's a big part of it. Do you respect the society and law that you live under, or not? Now, of course, you could say, well, a lot of the people that are protesting right now aren't respecting the law and the society, but I think that's because they have for so long. And they feel now that they just feel that they've become kind of voiceless and powerless, and do I think that the rioting that was originally it was supposed to be about protests, it's turned into riots. Do I think that is the solution to all of the problems that the UK faces. You know what? Honestly, I don't know. I wish it wasn't. Maybe it is. Maybe it is the solution. I hope it's not. I would prefer if it wasn't the case. If that wasn't that. If it, look, I don't know what the answers are. I don't think most people do. But what we can say for sure is that if nothing else, we need to close the borders, because there's far too many people in the country. I mean, what we at now? What, 67 million people? I mean, how many more people can we really actually accommodate in such a small amount of land before we have to start building ships or whatever, or little islands to build things on to accommodate all these people that are coming into? I mean, where does it end? How many people is enough? You know, it's like all this. Or you've got a moral obligation to take people because of things that you did in the past. You know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe to some extent we do, but not to the extent of what's going on and what's been happening over the last few years. No, we just can't. We can't continue like that. We just can't, because if this is just going to keep getting worse. If you just keep your head down, you know, go to work, pay your taxes, pretend that everything's fine and dandy, just for the sake of peace, and you know, tolerate and just keep tolerating things, and just keep pretending that the world's a happy, glorious, wonderful place, and that there aren't seriously deep resentments in our society from all sides, then you will see civil war. And to be honest, I think we are starting to see the beginnings of that, and I think we've started to see that over the last few years. I think there's one section of society that wants to dominate over another, and of course the working class wants to dominate over others. So what is this essentially about? It's about two things: tribalism and territorial dominance and control. And it makes sense. It's human nature. It is, whether you like it or not, part of human nature. You know, it might not. You know, the middle class will say, well, these people are unsophisticated. They're yobbish. They're thugs. They're chavs and whatever. And some of them are. But that also applies to those on the other side that are rioting that we've seen in Birmingham. You know, the people that are killing people and chopping people up and raping people and threatening people with violence from, you know, the left, these leftist activists, these Muslim groups that are popping up all over the place. They're in the wrong as well. They're violent and attacking people and being racist as well. So if we're going to look at this, we need to look at it honestly and say, yes, you're right. There are thugs from the working class, from the native Brits, let's call them, side of things. You're right. There are serious problems, and those need to be looked at. And we need to say, why is that? Why is this? What is going on here? Is it just people acting out and just being violent for the sake of it? For some of them, probably. Some people just want to be rebellious and stick two fingers up to the establishment and police just for the sake of it, because they've been brought up in. They've had no real sense of discipline and self-respect for themselves, and they don't respect society around them. But again, like I said in the last video, there are, I think, very, very complicated, difficult things that need to be talked about. You know, when you get rid of industries up and down the country that a lot of working class people relied upon, when you outsource things to agencies and put in place things like 0-hour contracts, and when it's more, not necessarily beneficial, but more appealing, let's say, to live on benefits rather than to going to work because work just doesn't really pay. just not worthwhile and there's just too much hassle, there's too much bullshit, then you're left with a lot of people in working class areas that have a sense of entitlement, and it's not necessarily all their own fault that the way they are, because they are a byproduct of failed government to address economic issues, and councils as well. And so what you've been left with is towns and cities that don't have enough jobs for everybody because there's a population crisis, and even if there was, a lot of people don't want to go to work because they've been brought up in generations of people being out of work and living on benefits. And again, there are complicated reasons for that. You can't just throw everybody under the bus and say they're all lazy, work shy, blah blah blah. Yes, that does exist, but that's not all the people. And even if it does exist, again, there's reasons for that as well. There's reasons why people are lazy. There's issues of society, of family, that have been allowed to just get out of hand. And I think that's essentially what's happened in the UK, is that everyone's just been left to their own, to do their own thing and to sort everything out by themselves, with no really sense of direction, where religion doesn't play a role in society anymore, where families have been broken down, where it's basically a single parent society now for the most part, where the police don't respect the people of that community because they don't respect them. So you've got all that tension, all that resentment bubbling underneath the surface. The police don't like the locals, and the locals don't like the police. Only a few decades ago this wasn't the case, so something's gone wrong. Obviously, something's broken down here. Something's gone very, 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 very wrong across a lot of different areas of society, and just, I think, just a breakdown of culture, really. There's banning smoking in pubs, making alcohol too expensive so people don't go out to the pub anymore, closing pubs. People can't afford to keep pubs open because it's too expensive to run such businesses. Loads of independent shops that were there can't afford to keep up anymore because everything's gone the way of shopping centres and so forth. So the high street's been decimated. A sense of community is gone because of kind of, in a way, pubs kind of help to some extent build a sense of community, and so did religion as well. It brought people together. But I think ultimately, the law, I think just people were brought up with more of a sense of. I think what's happened is there's been too much entitlement. There's been too much left wing, sloppy, lenient. It's just become too soft. I don't know how else to really describe it. I think the UK has just become excessively soft over the past few decades, where people know they can get away with things. There's no real deterrence or anything there to deal with things and try and prevent things from getting worse, really. It's become too left. I'm sorry to say it. I'm not completely against, like, I think people get this idea that if you love your country, or you support it, or you like football, for example, or you sing sort of football chants and things like that you're somehow a Nazi or a scumbag or something, or whatever bullshit rhetoric and pathetic arguments that the left tend to put out. It's just a load of bollocks, honestly, for the most part. It's just an absolute load of shit. It doesn't wash. It's not, and most people aren't buying it anymore. Like I said before, in my previous videos, people are not buying it anymore. People have seen through this shit now. Partly thanks to the movement of online journalists and so forth. and the decline of TV. One time people were more drawn towards watching the TV, but over the last sort of 10 years or so, that's gone into decline because people know that they've been lied to, being used, being manipulated, and that the left and the middle class, not everybody, obviously, but a lot of people that are more left-wing, certainly towards the far left, and certainly with regards to upper working classes and middle classes, a lot of them have proven themselves to be very anti-working class. And people have seen it. People have finally woken up and seen the truth, seen what's going on, and they've realised that we've been played, and they're trying to get everybody against each other, and that's what this government's doing. And Starmer has really ruined his chances of ever, I think personally, ever gaining power again come the 2029 general election. I personally think there'll be a general election well before that. I can't see this government lasting much longer unless some serious issues are raised in the House of Commons over the next few weeks, months, years, because unless we start now talking about these difficult issues of all sides, of all areas of the country, we're not going to get anywhere. We're not going to improve. We're not going to change, and the country will be at war with itself. The people will be against the police. The police will certainly be against the working classes. The working classes will be against the left, and these Muslim gangs that are going around, and the Muslim gangs will be going after them. And you'll just have ethnic, racial tensions and war, sort of areas of the country that basically just end up being no-goes, as there already are now, actually. But it'll just get on a much worse scale, and before you know it, the army will have to be called in to keep people apart from each other, and there'll be certain areas that'll just be possibly be out of bounds for a lot of people, and there'll probably be curfews and lockdowns and things, and it'll become like Nazi Germany or something. It'll be like a combination of Nazi Germany and socialist Russia. It'll be to me, in my opinion, I've not been in the country for, apart from an 8-month spell a few years ago, I haven't been in the country pretty much for the better part of almost 10 years now. And it wasn't as bad as it is now when I left in 2015, but it was getting worse at that time. Things weren't getting better. The people keep talking about the 2011 riots, and that was kind of a flashpoint. I think that was I suppose a sign of things to come, because it was showing that people were fed up with austerity. People were fed up with draconian measures, and people were tired of the government, the police, authorities. And since then, even back then, I don't think things were quite as bad as they are now, from what I can recall. I don't think I've ever seen my country in such a, I hate to use the word tinderbox, but I don't think I've ever seen my country in such a vulnerable, hostile, dangerous situation as it is now. I've never seen it like this ever. I mean, look, when I grew up, I saw in my own communities, in my own area where I lived, in the east part of Hull, we had crime, we had petty crime, we had gang violence from time to time, we had mobs of chavs and things, and the occasional GBH and things like that, and occasionally guns being used and things, but it wasn't a common occurrence really. Not I think the last time I ever saw anything like massive happen in my city, but then I've been there since 2015 really, was in 2005 or 2006 when I think some people had used a shotgun or something, and the police helicopter was out, and there were riot vans and police all over the place, and that was quite a. So I wouldn't say, I'm not going to sit here and say that it wasn't uncommon to see the police, because you did see the police like quite often, but it wasn't like every day or every week. It was just like maybe every few weeks or every few months even. You might see some police dealing with something. So it's nobody's under any illusions that nobody's pretending that there aren't issues with our own people that need to be addressed. Apart from those that want to. The thing is, it's divide and conquer now. That's what we're seeing playing out, and so you're seeing people using all sorts of straw man arguments and things, and just throwing any kind of slander and sleaze and unfounded claims and just anything to see if the shit'll stick, basically. And that's that. The thing is that there are problems from all sides of this. There are problems with the working class communities. There are problems with far left extremists and far left rhetoric and narratives and ideology that controls the media and authorities and those in positions of power. And there are problems, very serious problems, with the Islamic communities across the country and others. And unfortunately, people don't want to talk about it because it's too. I think people that could change things know that the moment that they start really addressing on a deeper level the problems of the United Kingdom is the moment that the country goes up in flames. Because people are going to get offended, people's feelings are going to get hurt on all sides. If we're going to deal with this, we need to sit down as adults and maturely talk about all of the issues that are going on and that have been going on for decades. And that also applies to the government itself, the police. And those who have allowed and those who have supported this left-wing dominance over all aspects of society for too long. I think there are things to be said about the left and the right that are good. But there are also problems on both sides. There are tensions and things that are being done and have been done over the last few days on both sides that are unacceptable. That you could say, well, like the issue of setting fire to a migrant hotel. Now, I don't think that's the way to do things. I don't think that I get that people want these people out of the country, but you see what it comes down to is this. People have tried to warn the government about how they see things panning out. That's what all these protests have been about with regards to Tommy Robinson over the last sort of year or two, whatever. And they've tried to peacefully, as best as possible, express their concerns, and it's fallen on deaf ears. And because of that, people feel that they don't matter, that they're being ignored, that they're not relevant anymore, that they're not supported, that they're the enemy of the state, basically. And because of that, I think a lot of people have said, okay, fine. If you don't want to deal with this, then we will. And so what you see now, and this, I do not think that attacking mosques or hotels or people's livelihoods is the way to deal with things, because that only fuels the other side of what's going on and what needs to be addressed, and that only massively fuels the media's narrative, which they already weren't willing to negotiate anyway. But now it's concrete. All those working class people that protest or support any of this, regardless, even if there's some rational arguments and things that could be said that actually might be true, that might be relevant, that they're all essentially fascist, basically. That they're all a major threat to society and peace and stability of this country, and they all need to be dealt with, and they all need to be kept down and demoralised even further, while in the process we watch the other communities get protected and let them get away with all sorts of things, and they're committing crimes and doing things and being racist and damaging people's properties and targeting people and using machetes and knives and things like that, and threatening people with assault and terrorism and things. So what we've seen play out over the last few days is exactly what people knew existed, but now it's 100% confirmed that there is an actual, genuine, very real, very obvious, what people are calling two-tier politics, two-tier society, two-tier policing, two-tier government. But most people have known that for years. But we're seeing it really happen when you've got, I don't support anybody going out there and committing acts of violence or vandalism. Full stop, actually. Now I can understand it, and I even can understand it to some extent from the other side. But I don't support it, and I don't agree with it. I don't think this ends well, and it won't end well. This will get worse, this will get much more violent, and people are going to get hurt, and people are going to get killed. And we're going to see more terrorism acts. But what you can't have in society is a government that's supposed to represent everybody, or certainly the natives of that country, if nothing else, more than anybody else. You can't have a government protecting minority classes or certain religions for the sake of peace and diversity and inclusion. Well, we've seen where all of that has led to, haven't we? We've seen where all of that's gone. We've seen how woke has destroyed pretty much everything. Everything's is ruined. Everything's gone to shit. The whole of the United Kingdom has become an absolute dump of a place and a cesspit. And that pains me to say it because it's my country. But it's the truth. It's the truth. Not so long ago I was thinking I might go back to the UK, but now I'm like, I can't go back to that. I can't go back to this sense of. It just seems to me now that everyone's at each other's throats, and the government haven't helped. They've actually, I think, probably fueled it. In fact, they have fueled it from decades of negligence and pandering and not listening to the people's concerns. They've caused this. no, they're not responsible for the violence, but indirectly they've actually kind of caused it. And anybody else that supported this open borders, pro-globalist narrative, agenda, let's call it, you're to blame for it as well. And if the country does go up in flames, like on a much larger scale than we're seeing now, you are to blame for it, partly. Of course, you can't answer for the individuals that are going out there and destroying things and assaulting people. No, fair enough. But you can't say that you're not kind of complicit to some extent, indirectly, because you are, and you know you are. And so what we're seeing all now is the smear campaigning, guilt tripping, people trying to claim the moral high ground. But they're all to blame. They're all a part of the problem, all of them. But unfortunately, for the right side on the right side of political spectrum, unfortunately, certain people in working class communities aren't helping themselves. They're not doing themselves any favours, and I don't think that they ever just don't care. They just can't see it. But they're playing into the government's hands. The government probably wanted to bring in all these laws anyway. Eventually, they wanted to. We're just waiting for something to happen, and it's just probably been planned for years anyway. But they just can't believe the luck like that. We can bring all these authoritarian measures into place much sooner. That's what they want. So they want you to keep. They say that we've got to stop it, but really, they want you to keep being violent and vandalising things and ruining things and making the country less safe. Because that'll mean that eventually the police won't be able to control it, because it'll get to such a large scale that they'll just be outnumbered. And so, like you're seeing now in, I think it's Belfast, where you're seeing these like really serious like riot units and things being brought in, and eventually the army will be brought in to deal with it. And like I said in my last video, I don't know exactly how that will go, but I just can't see that ending well, because if people start getting killed, the country will just erupt into absolute mayhem. It'll be unlivable for most people. A lot of people will leave, and you'll just really start to see, if you think there's a divide and hostility now, and resentment and bitterness and hatred, then you'll see it on a scale that hasn't, I don't think, really been seen across much of Europe for the past few decades, really. And that is maybe the point where things will start to change. I think what we can say for sure now is that regardless of what's going on with these so-called thugs on all sides, although I would say some are more thuggish than others, and they don't represent everybody of those communities, let's say that as well. I really think that now we need to sit down and we need to say, look, this isn't working, is it? This isn't working. It's not working. People are at each other's throats. Nobody fucking likes each other. What we need now, I think personally, we need a government in power that gets very, 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 very tough on terrorism, on illegal immigration, cracks down on fraudulent legal migration, and just puts a cap on it. Much stricter rules around those things. Anybody of all communities, of all classes, anybody that's causing problems in the UK should be brought to justice on all sides, in all communities. We need to have a economic revolution. We need to get jobs back. We need to get a sense of what we are, of who we are, what does our country mean anymore. And I think that would bring people together. I think if we could, and in my opinion, I think we need to say, If you want to be a Muslim, if you want to practice your religion, fine, you can do that in your own homes. But we're going to be closing mosques because they're too much of a threat to our society. There's too many problems. There's been too much reported extremist preaching going on. We just can't have this anymore. And anybody else of any other communities, any other religious institutions or buildings that happen to be dealing with any of this stuff, they'll be closed as well. In my opinion, if I could, I'd put a ban on Islam. I'd put a ban on it. I just don't think. I think that is fueling a lot of problems, and it has been for a long time. I would say, look, if you want to be a Muslim, you can do it in your own home. But again, if you're found to be linked to terrorism, you'll be sent to prison for a very long time. If not, you'll have to leave the countries. We need to get. I think we need, and also for people, anybody else that's causing vandalism and problems across the country, you will go to prison for a very long time. We don't need this. We don't need this disorder. We need solutions. Not vandalism, breaking things. Yeah, that's all good and well. And getting your point across to some extent. We get it. But it's not. All you're doing is dismantling society, dismantling people's livelihoods, making people's lives unsafe, putting people on edge all the time. It's not going to work in the long run. We need actual solutions here. We need the laws, legislation and conversations that have needed to be had for decades. That's the way forward. We need to address what's going on underneath the surface, not putting sticky plasters on things. Doesn't work. That's been tried for the past 15, 20 years. Hasn't worked. Multiculturalism's failed. Illegal immigration has been a disaster. It's going to just keep proving itself to be it's just a ticking time bomb, and eventually you're just going to have it's just going to turn into a completely lawless society. Eventually, all of the people with any money and wealth will disappear and go elsewhere, and the country will become some godforsaken wasteland. It already kind of is anyway. So we need to get rid of this left-wing narrative. We've got to get rid of it. That's what's ruining the UK. And those people that are supporting it need to be put in their place, like they've been trying to put the working class in their place. Because that's ultimately what this is all about. I'm going to go in a second, but this is what this is all about. It's about power, dominance, control. That's it. Territorialism. People thinking that they're more morally righteous than anybody else, and that they've got more of a right to be protected and to get away with things more than other people. That shit's got to end. That's what's causing all of this. Two-tiered policing, councils investing in protecting certain people more than anybody else, and everyone else can basically go and get fucked. That's the attitude of these people. Well, I'm telling you now, things are going to change, and things need to, and if not, things better change very, very quickly. This is getting out of hand. This is becoming extremely, extremely dangerous, and I suspect that we are now heading for some kind of a civil war. And I'm not just saying all these things because I've heard all these things being spoken about. I'm saying things because I think that is actually genuinely what's going to happen now. Because I think people just... It's become about a claim to the land. That's what it's become about. This is about people thinking that they've got more of a right to the land than other people. What I would say is I think that some people do have more of a right to be there and to have their say than other people. And if other people don't like it, then they can leave. They can go elsewhere. And if people want to think that England, the UK, is going to become an Islamic country, then they've got another thing coming. People won't stand up for it. People won't have it. And if people think that gangs of Muslim men running around threatening people and causing chaos is going to be accepted, they've got another thing coming. If you think that people are just going to sit back and let the government destroy their lives, bring in all sorts of censorship and all sorts of draconian measures to make people's lives less happy and less free overall, and restrict free speech online, offline, people won't have it. This government will be it's dead in the water. It's not going anywhere. It's finished. Starmer's committed, but is confined his party to the dustbin. His political career is over. He's committed political suicide. They're finished, absolutely finished. And all I can say is, as much as reform might not be the perfect solution to everything, they're the only hope. They're the only hope now. No one's going to support an actual, real truly far-right government, but something of centre-right, bordering on kind of like middle towards kind of like far-right-ish. People might get behind that, and I hope that they do, because if not, the UK will become a non-country. It'll become a non. I'm really worried, really genuinely worried now, that people from all sides are going to be under attack, and it's just going to be. This government has made some very, 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 very serious errors here, and they're going to regret this. They're going to regret this come the ballot box, come the local elections next year and the next few years, and come 2029, if they even get to that point. I personally think there'll be a call of a vote of confidence in the government, and they'll be kicked out. I hope they are, because Starmer he's shown himself to be in support of sectarianism, to be in support of left-wing narrative, and to demonise and stereotype and generalise an entire voter base that I think is very, very conveniently forgotten, brought the Labour Party into power for a very, very long time. He needs to be gone, and it needs to be very fucking quickly. This is one of the worst governments I've ever known in my life. I thought the Tories were bad, and they were. What you're seeing now has been underneath the surface there for a very long time. Most people don't like each other. Most people hate each other, certainly among communities. They don't like each other. They don't want to be around each other. This is about territorialism now. This is about, as I've said before, tribalism and protecting what we as Brits, natives, feel is the best of. We feel that we should keep our own country, that we should be the centre of protection. We should be the centre of what's being discussed in politics. Not some shit that's gone over thousands of miles away. Not protecting people that support terrorism or just utter vile scum. And addressing the problems of the working class. Dealing with the problems in those communities. Why is there a rise in anti-police rhetoric and people acting out? Why? Because you've done fuck all to address it. That's why. You've done nothing. You've allowed all this shit to flourish. And your remarks, your communist-like approach to dealing with this thing. You've already. It's just everything this guy is saying is making things 10 times worse. He needs to resign, and it needs to be now. He needs to go. This man is a very, very, very dangerous individual, and his party is as well. These are the fuckers who have allowed this country to get into such a state that it's been in for so many years. And they need to fuck off. Because, quite frankly, this is going to get very fucking ugly. I'm sorry for swearing. But this is going to get very, very nasty very quickly.